everybody. Welcome into the webinar today. Today we're going to talk about your kid's journey on the internet, how to keep your kids safe online, that kind of thing. And I just want to say a couple things up front here. One, know that the reason that we're doing this is really just to keep your kids safe online, right? There's oftentimes, I've kind of said it in the intro stuff of like, we send our kids to the park or to the store or to the whatever, and we give them keys to a car and we give them rules. We give them rules when they go out and play. And then we just hand them a tablet or a phone and we say go. And so I think it's really important that we kind of, what do we do to set boundaries and guidelines for kids? The other thing I want to say, and just kind of talk through and give the warning here up front is we're going to talk about a lot of sensitive things, right? Everything from, pornography to suicide and other things that have happened, cyberbullying and other things. And the point isn't to really go get into those situations. It's to highlight and tell some of the stories of things that are happening to real people and how we need to, be aware of those as parents and friends and aunts and uncles and grandparents and whoever might be watching this, because these things are happening to kids out there and it's happening on the internet, and we need to be very careful of that. And so, why listen to me? What are my credentials and why to do this? So one, I'm the president at Vector Choice. And so we do IT, we do cybersecurity. I've been doing this for 15, 20 years. I mean, it seems like forever that I've been doing IT and cybersecurity. And, that's kind of this thing. I've actually, I won a car and a big conference for, just a speech I gave about how we were doing and what we were doing and some of those other things. But really the more important reason is I'm a dad. And so, I've got kids and I have to be aware of these things and know these things and do that in the context of, kids and cybersecurity and all the other things. And so know that I'm coming from that angle, and the dad thing is significantly more important to me than the other stuff. But this is what we spend our days doing is protecting people from hackers and security and all the other stuff. And so generally know how to tie and knock all that down. Now, the other thing I'm going to say as well is we're going to talk a lot at the end. We'll get more into, the practical ways and some of the things that to do. And some of those are tools and things you can use. And some of those are just conversations you need to have with your kids. So keep that in mind as we go through this, that there's going to be a lot of ground to cover and a lot of things that we'll go over. And so, one of the big things that I kind of, always get started with, and this is, like there's social media and there's all this other stuff that's going on out there. And I think what happens a lot of the time is people don't think about all of the stuff that is out there, right? We've all used these apps before. We've seen these things before. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have your kids that are using Facebook, and I mean, I laugh, the Skype apps there, but Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube. They're probably, your kids aren't using LinkedIn, but even Spotify and Audible and some of those programs, some of that stuff is certainly, as you guys will see, a place where you can find some of this garbage that's out there as well. And so really need to be aware of all the different things that are out there with that. And so, why does internet safety matter? So I think one of the big things to me about it is, why does it matter, is just running through some of these statistics, right? 27% of kids under the age of 18 have said that they've received sexting or nudes. So that's a quarter of all kids. And some of these stats, they're hard to get like the most recent years. So as more technology is prevalent, more of this is happening. So if this stat's a year or two old, I wouldn't be surprised if these numbers are higher than that. 1 in 8 will forward them without permission. So again, that you can't put toothpaste back in the tube. Once you put this stuff out on the internet, it's really hard to protect that and not have it get out. And especially when you're talking about teenagers and other things, there's a propensity to kind of share it, have it as a trophy, whatever it is. And so it's really important to talk to kids, and especially as they have phones and are of age, of why this is a real danger and why you don't want to be sending inappropriate content. Screen-based entertainment increases nervous system arousal, which amplifies anxiety. So you hear these studies, you see these things about all these people, and anxiety is up and all of this other stuff that's going on. And we have a very, very anxious generation, the new generation coming up. And a lot of it is because of this, right? We're used to these dopamine hits, these fast hits. And this is just general technology. It's not even necessarily internet stuff, but that definitely is a real concern. 18% of kids have been approached by a stranger online. So again, you're talking about somebody, maybe they're playing a game and somebody has approached them and talked to them. And the problem is there's a lot of grooming and other stuff that can happen. Sometimes it's totally innocent, right? I played video games in college and I played online and I talked to people, and almost all of those interactions were just us playing games and talking about the game, and it was no big deal. But there's also a subset of people that get approached in bad ways. And so you want to make sure you're talking to your kids about that ahead of time. And again, we'll get into those kind of tactics a little later. Millennials are more forgetful than previous generations, right? Columbia University found that when people know that they'll be able to find the information online, they're much more likely to not form a memory, right? Less likely to form a memory. So think about, like, if you're 40, 50, 60, whatever, how many phone numbers did you know growing up? You knew your friends' phone numbers and all these other things, and you could pound them out. I still know my phone number growing up. How many of your friends now do you know their phone numbers? Because it's in your phone. You can find it. You don't have to go look it up. And it's interesting because the other day, even I was talking to my wife, and my daughter was doing a thing with school. It was like, who's the vice presidents of all these different presidents and things. And well, I think it's really important that kids know history. So don't take this the wrong way. That's also kind of one of those things that sometimes maybe some of those things need to evolve a little with the education. Maybe they don't need to memorize the vice presidents, because you can go Google that. But it's also important to know that as technology comes out, kids are more forgetful. This is creating a real problem of things that they need to know. One of the most in-demand skills in the future is going to be the ability to pay attention, because we've just gotten so distracted. How many times does your phone ding, buzz, interrupt you? How many, you got a smartwatch, how often is that buzzing and vibrating and distracting you from the thing in the moment? And there was an interesting thing. You guys could do this experiment with your kid. It was the Diary of a CEO. He had a communication expert on, and he was talking about, they did an experiment. They put a string between them, and they grabbed the string and they held it and they had a conversation. And it was really easy to keep it taut while they were talking. And then the one guy that was doing it, he pulled his phone out and he looked at his phone. And when he did, the string dropped because somebody wasn't paying attention, and they dropped that off. And then he said, how'd that make you feel? He says, you weren't paying attention to me. And so they did it again, and he put the phone, but it was face up. And as he started looking down at the phone and doing that, the string dropped again. You lost the tension, you lost the connection, right? And then he finally took his phone and he set it, off to the side, upside down, and then he set it on the table. And both times it was like, how's that make you feel? You're paying attention to me, right? And I think these are the kinds of things that we want to talk to kids about. And that's not necessarily internet safety, but I think it's all this technology thing where we just give kids stuff without rules, without conversations, without talking to them. And it needs to be an important part of that conversation. Studies are showing that many children are first exposed to pornography between the ages of 10 to 13, with some encountering it as early as 8 or 9. And as I do these presentations, people come up to me afterwards and they talk about how early their kids saw it, how early they were exposed to it, those kinds of things. Sometimes it's accidental exposure, pop-ups, ads, mistyped URLs, those kinds of things that can happen, between ages of 9 to 10. It was a big deal for a while. There was whitehouse.gov and whitehouse.com, and whitehouse.com was definitely an inappropriate site, and whitehouse.gov is the website for the White House. Intentional searching or peer sharing, that usually begins in the early teens to maybe just barely the preteens, and repeated exposure, that usually increases in the early to mid-teens. Much of this exposure happens on phone, tablets, and gaming consoles. And I bet a lot of you didn't even think about gaming consoles when you were coming to get on this. It was like, well, let's go get on this call and let's go figure out how we protect them on their phones and their tablets. But gaming consoles have full browsers and everything as well. So it's really important to have age-appropriate conversations and make sure that those parental controls are all real critical in that. So how does social media affect your teen? And this is from teens. And again, this study was a couple of years old, but 58% not getting enough sleep, 57% not enough activity, physical activity, not enough focus on their schoolwork, unhealthy need for approval or attention, right? I want those likes, I want those dopamine hits, I want to post the perfect right thing. Not enough face-to-face interaction, sexualized too soon, not enough personal privacy, oversharing. That's interesting. I'll get to that later, but I think we give up privacy a lot these days, and it's a real problem. Exposed to hate speech, sexual predators, it's 40%, right? So there's a huge chunk of people that are getting exposed to this, and we probably aren't having those conversations. Being bullied, inhibit your brain development, bullying others. Only 5% said none of the above. So there's this huge chunk of people that are impacted by this, 95%. And I would guess that of those 5%, some were impacted at some level and maybe either didn't know, it didn't make an impression at the time, but they probably were, and it could have, consequences down the road. Mental health is a really, really big part of this as well. 32% of teen girls say social media makes them feel worse about themselves. That was Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, all those, their internal research. 32%, a third of teen girls say that social media makes them feel better or worse about themselves. And we're just like, here's this thing, go do it, right? And don't talk about that. Teens who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media are twice as likely to experience depression and anxiety. Twice as likely. Like, these are crazy kind of statistics where you just think about giving kids phone and social media. And then 1 in 3 teens, so a third again, say social media is mostly negative effect on their mental health. And like when we talked with my kids about some of this, I said, if you can find a study that shows me social media is good for you, I'll give it to you earlier. But we waited till they were, I don't know, almost 16 or 17 before they really had social media stuff. They had phones and we had rules and, they could text friends and all that kind of stuff. But it was a lot longer before we actually started letting them use social media and some of the other things on there. About 40% of teens report feeling pressured to look good on social media. Again, it's got to be the perfect picture and everything else. And you have to remember, same thing, 59% of teen girls, a lot of pressure to appear perfect. Excessive social media linked is reduced, use is linked to reduced sleep because it's this highlight reel. And even as adults, we fall prey to that, right? You're looking at Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever you're using, and, the TikTok stuff, whatever. And all of these people are showing you their perfect highlight reel and not showing like the crap that's going on behind the scenes. And so then you start to wonder, how do all these people do this stuff? How does all of this happen? What's going on in my life that I can't go do all those? And it's also part of the reason you see people thinking they got to make 100, 150, 200 grand and everybody's making 6 figures and all these really wrong impressions. And it's because somebody rented a private jet for $1,000 and they're taking pictures on it sitting on the runway and it never left the runway. They were in it for 7 minutes. But then they put this picture up and everybody thinks they were, and they talk about it. And, these gurus that really aren't gurus, they're just faking it. And that can be a real problem. Cyberbullying, victimization by gender. So if you look at this, I know it's probably kind of small and hard to read some of that, but I have been bullied is that first one. And it's 50% of girls and 40% almost of boys say they have been cyberbullied. Rumors online is 38%, 27%, posted mean comments, posted names, somebody threatened to hurt me. Like all of those things, if you look at it, they're all in there. And 1 or more of the above is true. That's 45%, the very last bar. 45% say 1 or more of the above is true, 2 or more times. And so that's 45% for girls, 37% for boys. So again, there's this huge amount of cyberbullying that's going on in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And we need to have conversations with our kids and make sure that they can have conversations with us when this stuff happens so that they feel like they're safe and they can have talks about that. This is offending, like who's doing it. So 25% have cyberbullied somebody, 20% intentionally excluded someone, 17% posted mean or hurtful comments or tried to embarrass somebody online. Like these are bad statistics, right? And this is 13 to 17-year-old middle school and high school students in the US. And then they went back and they asked people, what platforms are you most concerned about? And it was, look at the top, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, like those are the ones. But the problem is, if you go down to some of these other ones, Twitch has cleaned up some stuff, but Twitch, ton of pornography, live streaming and other stuff. Like it's mostly started around streaming games, but a lot of parents had never heard about it. And so people would stream games and other stuff, but you can stream anything. And for a long time, there was a lot of very inappropriate content there. Tumblr, there used to be, I don't know if it's as bad as it was. It's been traded hands and some other stuff, but it used to have a ton. I've got some pictures later actually of some stuff like 4chan. Discord can be really, really bad. A lot of people just use it for chat, and that's reasonable. It's just like group chat stuff, but it's also got a whole lot of inappropriate content that gets spread across it. And so there's these other apps that are out there that we don't even know about sometimes as parents. And so you want to make sure you're doing some research and other things like Omegle and House Party. There are these chats where it randomly pairs you with people to chat. And while that could be neat and interesting, you don't know what's on the other side of the camera. And there's a lot of, you get paired up with somebody and it's somebody sitting there naked or whatever it is, and they want to talk or they want to do whatever. And there's just a lot of that happens out there, more than you would think that it is. And so you want to make sure you know and you look and you can see if your kids have these apps and then what are they doing with them, right? It's Kik is a messaging app. By itself, it's not a bad thing, but what are they doing with it and why are they using different messaging apps and what's on it and how are they talking about it? 75% of parents think that their kids have not seen porn. So we have all these statistics showing that kids are being exposed to it at a very early age. And then 3/4 of parents are like, nah, it's not my problem. My kids haven't seen that. And it is way more prevalent. Like our kids come back and talk about, struggles at, youth group and church camp and other stuff. And where some of these people are talking about struggles they're having. And there's a significant portion that are struggling with porn and inappropriate content on the internet. And so again, it's a very, very thing. We need to confront it. It is happening out there. We have to confront it and talk about it. And so these next few slides here are kind of some examples of where you can find inappropriate content and what it looks like, because I think it's very important to know where this stuff exists and what exists out there. So if you look, this is a screenshot of this was 4chan, and if you look over on the right hand side at the bottom, there's adult requests. Everything in that right hand column really is all adult porn. There's a ton of racism stuff. Like 4chan is really just a terrible site. But there's a ton of stuff on there that's just bad. It makes it very easy to go find, and you probably never heard of it. This is YouTube on the left. So that's some different searches that I had done. And I don't know about you, but I don't want my kids learning about stuff that way, right? So first time sex advice, how to lose your virginity, whatever. And if you look, these are 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, millions of views that are on these. And this is easy to find. On the right-hand side, that is Spotify. And I've got some more of it, but you can see Spotify, and I honestly forget what I searched when I pulled this up, because I did this, prep a while back. But that is a girlfriend how to teaches you how to, kiss correctly. And that ASMR, if you ever see that, that is a very, I forget what it stands for. It's basically audio stuff. And so it's very, sometimes it's as simple as like an ASMR video of bubble wrap popping, and it's just microphones really close, getting very crisp bubble wrap popping. This is going to be all about the audio of how to kiss correctly. And if you look at this slide, this is, again, on the left-hand side, that is YouTube. So that is just, I would say inappropriate, just a bunch of, lesbian kisses and girls kissing. The middle one, that is, I just did a search for stripper videos, and you can see I had to block part of that out because there's a bunch of kind of strip tease and other stuff. Again, this is YouTube, and you can see millions and hundreds of thousands of views on those. And then on the right, that again is, I believe, YouTube, where it was, different things there from different searches. You can see the top one is obvious. Again, had to block that out. And then on the bottom one, you can see that that's, how to go down on a guy. Like there's really stuff that you don't want your kids probably learning off of YouTube or those kinds of things. This was just Google searches, right? So again, I just did a Google search. If your kids use Reddit, a lot of them do, search for Reddit porn. And here's all of these Reddit themes with porn and where to go find it and all the best communities. And then I tried to think of like a younger kid, and I said, I want to see naked girls, right? So I Googled naked girls, and here's all the stuff that quickly pops up there, right? It's very, very easy to see that. And hopefully this isn't overwhelming. Everybody's going through it. Here's Audible on the left hand, and the both of those pictures actually are Audible. So again, there's some erotic stories about the housekeeper, and the other one is sex sounds and erotic audio. We have a friend actually who recently told a story, and their kid was asking Alexa in their room to tell them dirty things and play dirty sounds and sex sounds and things like that. And you think the Alexa's like a reasonable thing. You wouldn't think about it, but that's what was happening in the room. This slide here, you can see this is Spotify. So again, I wanted to look at sex podcast videos. And so there's all of these different things that are in Spotify, which you would normally think is fine. And then the middle one there is audio, that's for sexy naked girls. And there's a whole bunch of just different audio in there, but you can see the pictures, again, had to block those out because there was nudity on those. And that was just, like album cover, thumbnails, other things. And then the last one is, adult sex sounds. And again, nudity on that one, had to block that out. And so all of these things are there, and try things like if you want, and don't, I don't know, I screwed up my whole feed. I actually screwed up my wife's feed because I told her I was going to do this on her phone. But I went and I searched, and you search for things like different emojis, and you can Google this, like what emojis are for sex or for porn or whatever, like the eggplant emoji or the water emoji, the peach emoji is a butt. You can search those on, different things, Instagram or Spotify, Audible, different, social media things, and you'll be surprised at kind of the stuff that will turn up. Misspell things, like instead of porn, misspell it and do PRON, things like that can make it so you can go find stuff easily, right? But ads tend to be less regulated, and a lot of the time people get places like get on YouTube and search for first time having sex or other terms. But 93% of boys and 62% of girls have seen pornography before the age of 18. So again, 75% of parents say not happening in my house, but 93% of boys and 62% of girls say they've seen it by the time they're not 18. 41% said it made them less respectful of the opposite sex, and 75% of parents think their kids have not seen porn, right? So, right, we got this really big discrepancy, and it's a real problem. This was how to find porn on the Xbox. So again, just a Google search, right? So I want to go do that. I'm a kid. I can search it. Here's exactly how to do it. And then this is on the Xbox. I just searched boobs, because that's what I wanted to see as a 12-year-old or whatever it is. And if it wasn't pixelated out, we have tools that push this stuff, and I didn't want to go turn it all off when I did it, but we have things that force kind of safe search and everything else. And if I went and said, show me those things, there's a lot of, I mean, that's porn. Like that's what is there. And that was on the Xbox. So if your kid has a Xbox, PlayStation, whatever in their room, they can go find this stuff, even though you might think you've got other rules around it. It's real easy to go do that. So one of the things I want to stop for a second, one, just to stop hammering on some of that stuff, and two, just to do a little bit of a segue about kind of dangers of the web. And so this gets a little bit into cybersecurity and some of the things we talk about. But again, I think it's important for parents to understand some of what's out there on the internet. And again, we look at this a lot of time from like a hacker perspective and what can they do and what bad can they go do. But there's also a lot about like kids can have access to this. It's not hard to go do. So a lot of the time what we talk about is the visible web, which is, Google, Reddit, social media, Microsoft stuff, like all the normal stuff you think about. But a significant portion of the internet is the dark web. And some of that is very, harmless, right? It is research and social, stuff that happens, or universities and things like that, where there's all of this kind of other things that happen. And it's off on the dark web. And kind of in that middle ground. And then there's the really bad stuff. So Tor is the onion browser. There's stuff like Pirate Bay and Silk Road Online. Both of those have generally been shut down, but people probably have heard about them. And it was, pirated movies and other things. And I've got some stuff here I'll show you, but what you can find on the dark web. But it's as easy sometimes as do a search, how to get on the dark web. And then right there is a security blogger telling you how to get on the dark web. So if I'm a kid, all I have to do is search, how do I get on the dark web? I've heard about this thing, and it's going to show you how to get on there and go see the stuff that's on the dark web. So you say, what is on the dark web? Well, here's Silk Road, which again, this particular marketplace have been shut down. And this picture is older because it was just an easy, like this is the best kind of what's on the dark web I could see. But if you look on the left-hand side, drugs, right? I could buy ecstasy, cannabis, intoxicants, all these other drugs, and you buy it and you pay in Bitcoin. And again, this is when Bitcoin wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, or whatever it is right now. I think 60,000 or whatever. But this is probably when Bitcoin was, a buck or two or whatever, way back in the day. But these sites still exist out there. This one's just been shut down. And like I say, it was easier to just see like, here's the marketplace for it. And so you can order this stuff and they'll ship it to you. And, you get a FedEx package and it's got your Oxy in it, or it's got your meth, or it's got whatever it is that you want. Human growth hormones, whatever it is, here's the stuff, right? So you can go find marketplaces and go buy stuff. You can buy things like this. You want revenge? I'll F somebody up for you for $700. So, that's crazy. Here's counterfeit US dollars. So $50 bills, you can get 25 $50 bills for $600. The notes are on cotton paper. They pass the pen test when you draw on it. It's got UVI incorporated, so they'll pass the UV test, and they have all necessary security features. Right now, again, you can see that's Ulysses S. Grant on that. That's an older looking dollar. It's not the newer style. The point is you can go find this stuff really easy and go buy some counterfeit money. Or you could buy a fake ID. I want to figure out how to buy a fake ID. And this isn't even on the dark web. This is just a couple of fake ID websites on the internet. So again, what are your kids doing on the internet, and how easy it is these days to do that kind of stuff. And then some of the things they're seeing that I think is interesting is kids are using these DDoS attacks. So DDoS attacks is denial of service. You basically send a ton of traffic at the internet and it shuts down a site because it can't handle it, right? So I send it at you. And what's interesting is these guys are using these to disrupt school classes. And there was even this is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think it was El Paso ISD during STAR testing. They were, the state mandated testing. They were doing these attacks, and like they'd shut the internet down for 20 seconds, and then 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, they do it again, and they do it again, and they disrupted it enough that it kept screwing up the testing, and they had to cancel testing for a day because they just kept happening. And so, these kids are going out there, they'll pool some money, and for a few $100, they can go buy these, a few DDoS attacks and launch them against their school or whoever they don't like or whatever it is. And, it's kind of crazy. And the problem is there's real consequences to that if they get found out that it was them and they just thought it was funny, but there's real consequences. So, why does all of this matter, right? And so a lot of this, I think, gets into like social engineering, hackers, the DDoS. It seems like it kind of relates to kids and the internet, but where is it really happening and all this other stuff? But I think it's important, one, to know all those things can happen out there and that can be on the internet, and your kids can have access to that. So you want to have those conversations and talk with them and try to have tools to block that, which again, we'll get to in a little bit here. But The other part is even legitimate companies are collecting data and they're harvesting data. And back to kind of the earlier one of those stats about privacy, like we give it up far too much. And so one of the big stories that a lot of people don't know, but I find interesting, is Target. And a lot of people think of Target, they think of the hack that happened and all the credit card numbers got stolen, and that's important. But one of the things that was really interesting that happened with Target was most everybody I know that shops at Target a lot has the Cartwheel app. And the Cartwheel app can actually track you while you're walking around the store if you gave it permissions. And so there was a teenage girl and she got pregnant. She started going to Target and walking the baby aisle and kind of dreaming of pregnancy or whatever it was. And so Target noticed that and they started sending her mail to her house because she'd put in information and everything to Target, probably to ship stuff to her house and buying online or whatever. And they started sending her advertisements and coupons and things for baby products because they said, hey, you're spending a lot of time in the baby section. Maybe you want a coupon on that. So her parents actually got these, and Target outed her to her parents that she was pregnant because they started getting all this stuff for formula and diapers and whatever else. And they kind of said, hey, what's going on here? Why are you getting all this addressed to you, not to our house, but to you specifically? And she, told them she was pregnant and everything else. And most people don't think about that, right? And maybe they've changed some of those things, but people wonder why they get junk calls, why they get targeted messaging, why you think Facebook's listening to you and all these other things. And I'm not going to make a ruling one way or the other as to whether social media is listening to you, but they're also really, really good at correlating data. And Google has access to something like 95% of credit card transactions because they bundle it up and they buy it from Visa and MasterCard and everybody else. All these people are selling all of this data. Target wants to bundle up your data and sell it because what Target wants to know, and the reason why you want you to use the Cartwheel app and the other thing is every 90 days you buy toothpaste. So at day 98, you haven't bought toothpaste. Maybe I'll send you a message about or an email about a sale on toothpaste because you probably need it. And it's been 90 days. And so let me bring you into the store. And if you come in to buy toothpaste, you'll buy 3 other things. So they get really, really good at trying to figure out what your spending habits are and what you're buying and all this other stuff. And one, they'll bundle it up and sell it. 2, they can use it to further in their marketing and other efforts. And so you want to be careful and teach your kids about that, about why it's important to not give away their data all the time to everything, because they'll probably give away a lot more than they realize. Amazon got in trouble for this, and these are 2 pretty sad stories. And so this one, parents, they filed a lawsuit against Amazon because they were selling suicide kits. And so what it was is you could go out and you could Google and look up some things, and you can go Google and find it on your own. I don't necessarily want to get into it, but there's a couple of different things you could go buy. One that would essentially poison you and another one that would stop you from throwing up, and then books on how to do it. And people were actually bundling these together and selling it as like a kit. Here's a kit because you're interested in this. Do you want to buy these things too? And they were selling these things, and there are several stories that came up, and that's why these different parents got together and sued them for it, was that their kids ordered the kit. And, one story I remember reading as I was doing prep for this was it was somebody, he had talked to his kid and everything good. Yep, everything's great. He goes, I'm going to go do XYZ. He went out, ran errands, came home a few hours later, and his kid had committed suicide. And it was through stuff that he had bought. And I just think, like those are generally, I mean, it's terrible, right? Like there's no other way around it, is that was there and it was able to be bought. And so again, this gets out of like, how do you protect your kids by rules, and how do you have conversations with your kids and make sure they feel like they can talk to you about struggles and things that are going on and what's real in the world. And Molly Russell, she was in the UK. That's that bottom story there. And she has a really sad story, and she ended up, the short version is she committed suicide. But what they found was that over a third of her feeds from and I forget exactly, I mean, it was, Pinterest and some of those things, a third of her feeds or so, she was 14 years old, and a third of her feeds were self-harm. So what happens is these algorithms get really, really good at what you're looking at, and they give you more of it. So some kids having a depressed day and they search something, and then social media thinks maybe you want to see more of that. And maybe it just starts out as like, I don't know, some dark video or whatever, but it could get into darker and darker corners. Now, the social media companies are trying to get better about that, right? Like they legitimately are, but it's also out there a lot. And so I'm sure you guys have seen that. You hover over a picture for a second because you're trying to figure out what it is, and then you see another one, and then you see another one, and then you see another one. And it happens to me sometimes. I always chuckle as like, I don't know, I'm a mechanical engineer by training in college and some other stuff. So I'll see some random building video. I'm not a construction guy in terms of doing construction, but I'll see some video, I'll watch it for a minute because I think something's interesting, and then the next like 12 videos are that same kind of thing. And that's the algorithm kind of shoving what it thinks you want in your face more and more, trying to give you what you want to keep you in the app. The problem is when that isn't healthy content, it keeps shoving more and more unhealthy content in your face. There was this story, I think, kind of gets into like how fast this can happen and the danger of it. And so there's the predatory web of sextortion is increasingly ensnaring young athletes. And so this story is about a year old, maybe a little older than that. And again, kind of the short version of the story is there was kid, football player, athletic, homecoming king kind of person. Like everybody in school liked him. And it was actually a couple of guys that are out of like Nigeria. They were, I don't know, cousins or some silly thing. They were just texting people and trying to trap people. And so they went and they had texted this kid and they had, basically convinced him over the series of several texts and whatever time it was to send an inappropriate picture. Then they said, hey, we have all of your contacts. We have all of your information. Instantly turned and started saying, send us money or we're going to distribute this to everybody. So he panicked, and I think they wanted $1,000. He said, I only have $300. And so he sent the money, and they kept pressing, and they kept pressing, and they kept pressing. And the really terrible short version of this is that it was 5 hours from the first text message he got to him taking his own life. And in 5 hours, he decided life wouldn't be worth living. And they pushed him to that. And what it highlights to me, and I think what's so incredibly sad about this is like nothing that he sent or whatever at the age of 16, 17, 18 is life ending. There's consequences for actions, and our kids need to know that, but none of it should have been anything around that. And, and his parents, they interviewed him. It was an ESPN story. And so you can go look ESPN, online predators prey on young athletes. If you really want to read it, it's a sad, sad story. And they talk through what happened and like his parents, good relationships and everything else. Like it wasn't like he was this really crazy depressed kid. It was just he thought his life was going to be over and socially and everything else, and it was going to ruin everything. And so he just didn't know how to handle that. And so I think that's the reason why it's really, really important to think about what can you do and what do we do. And I think talking to your kids is one of the big things. And I know this seems, everybody just wants the tools and whatever else to go do it. And we'll get to that. But I think these next few slides are the most important ones, because if my kids get exposed to inappropriate content, I can deal with that. If your kid ends up taking their life or hurting themselves or hurting somebody else, there's those consequences are infinitely worse. And so we have to have these conversations with kids, and we have to be able to talk to them, and we have to help build them up, because when kids have good values on the inside, they have less need for validation outside. John Maxwell said that. I think it's incredibly true. But the big thing is if your kids don't have good values, and maybe they do, but what is their real self-esteem? What is their self-worth? How many of those conversations have you had with your kids? And there's a ton of resources that are out there, and you can search a ton of this stuff up. And I would say, like, challenge everybody, like, dig into it to have good, meaningful conversations with your children, with the youth that you're around, because it's really important. And I think it's important that they not only have good values, they have good self-esteem. And so some of the drivers of low self-esteem, and this is from Positive Psychology, is too much praise with unrealistic expectations and standards. I think you can see a lot of that. You can go back to helicopter parenting or whatever you want to call all that. But it was like praising everything they did, and everybody got participation trophies and all the other things. And then we wonder why kids have low self-esteem. And it's because they had unrealistic expectations and they couldn't meet them. And that was hard. Peer victimization, high BMI, academic stress, negative feedback, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're no good, those kinds of things. And so I think we got to be careful, right? You want to praise kids for doing good and hard things and for doing things, but not too much. You don't want to set unrealistic expectations. You want to know if their peers are bullying them and the other stuff. And this isn't by any means any kind of fat shaming or whatever else, but high BMI specifically drives low self-esteem. So can there be conversations around that and talking about body positivity some and everything else, but even just healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, those sorts of things that might need to happen. And then again, what's realistic around stress or academics and those kinds of things. And so we build self-esteem in kids by letting them fail, right? Give them chores, give them projects, have them go do that. A good example, I think, of this, and my wife kind of gave me a hard time about it when I did it, but I told her I had reasons and just to trust me on it, was one of my kids, he turned 16, and the door lock actuator, we use the automatic lock and it locks and unlocks it. It failed. And he's never replaced that. So we found the part and he ordered it and he paid for it and it came in and he said, Dad, I want to go do that. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look it up on YouTube because I'm trying to teach him the skills, see how to do it, and I want you to go take a stab at it. And if you're stuck or you feel like you're yanking or pulling or whatever too hard, come get me. I absolutely want to help you with this, but I want you to also learn the skill of how to do things that you don't know how to do. And so had that conversation with him. I talked through it and he watched the video. And I said, after you watch the video, come talk to me about it. Right. And so he came, this is what I think I need to do. I said, that sounds right. Why don't you go try that? So he does that. And I walk out and how are you doing? And I made my presence known and I gave him the ability and the option at that moment to ask questions. Good, Dad. Awesome. Go back in, come back out a few minutes later. So I just kind of kept showing up and being present and seeing what he was doing so that he could ask a question if he had to. But the real goal was I wanted him to fail. I wanted him to struggle through things. And he came in and found me several times and said, Dad, I can't figure this out. We would go out and we'd figure it out. But afterwards, I could tell you, he had such self-esteem around it. Like he did a hard thing. He had no idea how to do it. And he took a door apart and he replaced the door lock actuator and he figured all that stuff out. And we had to help him on certain things. And a buddy of mine that he knows from Scouts, who's a mechanic, he called him and, got tech support, but he got through it and he struggled through it. And then you got to be careful on the other side of overpraising, right? Way to go. Good job. You did a hard thing. Those are all great. But if you praise it for the next 15 days, then that probably gets into like doing more harm than good. Competence at things takes time. It has to be taught. They have to fail. So you've got to do those things over and over and over again. You want to help set appropriate, reachable goals and offer appropriate praise, and then let them handle those issues and problems where appropriate. Another example is I've built a shed in the backyard. And again, kind of a handy guy or whatever, but we had to frame the window out, right? Where the window was going to go. You got 2x4s on the side and headers and, things. And so I wanted my kids to do that. And so I taught them how to use a nail gun and we sat there and we measured the window. It took them 5 times to get the window right because they did the 2x4s on the wrong side and then they would put it too low and then they put it too hot. And I talked through it and then I let them fail. And then we talked through why they failed. And I was there the whole time with them and it took them 5 times. But at the end of it, they now know how to do it. They know what they did wrong. They learned from that lesson. And now every time they walk in the backyard and they see that shed, they go, I helped build that thing. And that can help build that self-esteem because they did a hard thing. And I'm not saying every kid's got to go build a shed or whatever else, but what hard things can they do? What can you help them struggle through with them leading the charge, right? And try to find those things. Hey, I need you to clean this or do that. Have them have chores. Tell them good job when they got it done, but you don't need to overpraise that. Another big thing I think we miss out in general in society is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset embraces the view that skills and abilities can develop over time with practice, and there's more than one way to tackle a challenge. Fixed mindset says skills and abilities are set, we're not going to overcome those obstacles. So again, if you go back to some of these problems we talked about earlier, if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts and depression and all these things that are kind of the worst of the worst in terms of where the outcomes would be, right? If you're struggling with unhealthy images online, that you can work through, and I'm not downplaying it, but the end of that isn't somebody taking their life. And so it's the suicide, the depression, the other things. Some of these things can help with that because I can overcome this. I can overcome the obstacle. I can get through this. I can figure out a way to deal with it. And that becomes really, really important in those conversations. And so, some of these kind of things, I'll click through these a little bit quickly, but fixed versus growth is, do I want to look smart versus do I want to learn? Right? I want to look smart means I've got to make sure I have all the answers and everything else, or it's okay if I missed. It's okay if that was wrong. I'm not saying bad grades are good, but I need to learn. And if I screw up a little along the way, as long as I'm learning, that's good. Right? Do I avoid challenges or do I embrace them? Do I give up too easily or do I persist? Is it effort fruitless and a waste of time, or is the path to being good at something, by going through that effort? And oftentimes I'll see that where people are doing something and then parents jump in and help. And I'm like, no, let them fail at it a little bit. Let them struggle. Let them figure it out, right? Do I ignore feedback or do I learn from the criticism? Do other people's success threaten me or do I learn from other success? Those are the kinds of things. And luckily, I think there's a lot of kind of things online of learning from others and their success and everything else, which is very accessible, which is good. But then I also think you tell somebody they do something wrong and, they don't learn from that criticism. And you want to criticize correctly. Don't get me wrong. Man, you suck. You can't do anything right. That's not good. But what do we learn from this? Why isn't this the best way to do this? How can we do this a different way? Those kinds of things can help people develop and kids develop into that and allow them to have, kind of more grit to face these challenges as they move forward. You want to educate your kids. So this is getting into kind of some of the actual practical tips of the online stuff, right? Not every link is a good link. I always say the best advice you can give people that aren't, internet savvy is treat the internet like it's April Fool's. Everybody's trying to trick you. And so if you just think of that and everybody's trying to trick you, why am I clicking on this? Why am I doing that? Don't install anything without asking, especially youth, right? The younger they are, making sure they're doing that. Everyone on the internet's a stranger and none of them are your friend. It's just the way that it is, right? Make sure they kind of start there and that's where they're at. And it's stranger danger. It's don't take candy from strangers. It's all the things that maybe if you're older, you learned about as a kid because we we're all worried about a truck rolling up and somebody giving them candy and then kidnapping them and running off. But the problem is that happens digitally now. And it's not kidnapping, but it's kidnapping their mind, their brain, grooming them, teaching them things they shouldn't be taught, and exposing them to things they shouldn't be exposed to. If there's ever doubt, they should ask, hey, this person's doing this online, and I don't know if that's good. They should learn to ask, and that you'll help answer that. It's okay to be bored. Boredom drives creativity, right? Ground your kids or don't let them have it, or screen time or whatever. Like, my kids, sometimes the punishment is we're grounding you from electrons, right? Anything that takes electricity. And if you do that, it's kind of funny. One, they learn how to use a stove because they can't use the microwave. And two, they get bored for a little bit, then they get creative. And it's really interesting to find what happens when you don't let them watch videos and other things. We'll have detox weekends sometimes. Don't do it all the time. Every once in a while, we're just, hey, no electrons this weekend, right? Like, I mean, the microwave's fine or whatever, but like, let's not watch movies unless it's family movie night. We're not going to just sit around and watch TV. We're not going to play around on our, phones and tablets and whatever. Like, the weather's beautiful. It's great in the spring. Let's go do things, right? And it's amazing to see what kind of happens around that. And then I think it's really important, again, the target story, right? You are the product. Companies want your data. So just making sure they know that every, program for, free points and everything else, it's because they're trying to harvest your data and what you're doing. And that's generally what they're doing. It's not all nefarious. You just need to know and understand. That's why companies want you to sign up for these programs and other things, is they want your data. Lead by example, right? Model good behaviors, put your phone down, have conversations at dinner, don't scroll your phone, build relationships with your kids so they feel like they can talk to you. That becomes, I think, really, really important in those harder topics of having good relationships with your kids. So they feel like they can come to you and they can talk to you. They can ask you hard questions. They can talk about things. And if you're doom scrolling and you don't stop and have that conversation with them, all you're teaching them is that you don't care and you don't want to listen and you don't want to have a hard conversation. And so if they get that impression, they'll give up pretty quick and they'll go Google it and they'll go ask AI and they'll go ask Alexa and they'll go ask these other things. And that's where you don't want them. You want to set boundaries. So again, these are behavior-based kind of things, right? No devices behind closed doors, no devices after bedtime, no devices in the bedroom after X time, no devices at family time, right? Dinner, movie night, whatever it is. Make sure they know that you can check on their devices and know the passcode and then follow through. And I'm not saying spy on your kids or whatever and do it, but like my kids knew, I bought that phone, I paid for that phone, that's my phone. I can check and see what you're doing. And we would spot check it occasionally, and we'd usually do it with them. Hey man, can I see your phone? I just want to see what you've been texting, what you've been doing. We just kind of look through a little bit. What are their emails? What are they doing? What's the history on the browser? What apps do they have? You take a quick scroll, and if there's not something, what's this app? Oh, I use it for this. Oh, okay, that's for school. Cool. What's this, that? And if they know those questions are coming, there's an accountability there, right? And that tends to make people just behave better. And then some of the other ones are, again, just about accountability, right? Closed doors. Why? You don't need to do that back there, right? After bedtime, it goes back to not sleeping enough, kids sitting in their bed, scrolling phones, all that kind of thing. Like, don't let them do it. Just set rules. Hey, my phone is my alarm. Awesome. You can have it on the other side, or go spend $20 and buy an alarm, right? It's better to do that than to let them, use excuses to try to say, this is why I need this in my phone or my room or whatever it is. And then always tell them you can be the bad guy, right? Let them know that it's okay to blame you and to be the way out. And I think this is super important for social activities and everything else. My kids all know they can blame me for anything. I will be a tyrant to their friends if they need me to. And I don't even have to be it. They can just, man, I can't go do that. My parents would murder me. You don't know how strict they are, how crazy they are. Like, absolutely can't go do that. It would be terrible if that happened, right? And I would rather be the bad guy if it saves them face and allows them to get out of a bad situation. And so just let them know that, right? Have a code word they can text you, or a thing they can text you that you're going to then call them back and be like, you didn't clean the garage, get your butt home right now. So they can get out of a difficult situation and go, man, my dad is mad, or my mom is mad, or whatever it is, because I didn't do X, Y, Z. And they know really what that is it's just, I need help. Right? Call me and do that. But maybe they can't text all that, or friends are nearby, so they're just texting you whatever your code word is or what it might be to try to get out of that situation. some of the tools to use, and I caveat this with the first one, right? Don't spy on your kids. Use apps to help keep them accountable and let them know why they're there. I think the why is a big conversation we miss a lot in society. So make sure you're having that kind of why conversation with your kids. A couple of these Life 360, right? That's tracking, driving, monitoring, seeing where they're at. You can do it also with, Find My and your family stuff on your phones and Androids that kind of track that. But Life 360 gives a little bit more. You put the whole family in it, everybody can see what's going on. Bark and Circle, those are apps. Bark will actually look for like cyberbullying. Circle, I think, does some of it too, in the text messaging, and if pictures that are being sent are inappropriate, and it will alert parents. There's parental controls built into iPhone, Android, PC, Mac. Go Google parental controls for whatever device, and you can find a whole bunch of it. Check history, look at browser history, look what's going on, but also know about incognito or in private modes. Those exist, and it deletes all that history out of there and doesn't save it. So a lot of the time, if their history just looks clean, it might be that they're actually hiding something, and that's why it looks so clean. So just check the history and know what's going on there. And then there's services. And again, you can just Google this. If you Google 1.1.1.1 for families, it will show you how to go do the configuration. That one's a little more difficult. You basically are setting up the router, your firewall between you and the internet, to use a few settings, and those settings will block pornography and malware and a few other things. And then also look into the parental controls around your PCs, right? There's Safe Search, there's Microsoft family accounts, there's Google family accounts that'll work on like Chromebooks and stuff as well. And in those family accounts, you can force things like Safe Search. So Safe Search basically says if it's inappropriate content, block it, filter it out of the search results. And so there's just different tools that you can use out there. And so look at some of these tools like Safe Search, like family accounts, like parental controls, and just do some research and figure out what's already there. Most of these don't cost any money. You can just use them. Bark, Circle, Life 360, those cost a few dollars, but they can be good. And there's other apps that are out there as well. Covenant Eyes and some other ones that can help just know what kids are doing and keep them accountable. Some of the other tools to use, more technical, upgrade your router, right? You can do time scheduling, filtering, mobile control, so you can connect and control from your cell phone. Then you can look specifically at routers from Griffin, Firewalla, Circle, Netgear, Orbi with smart parental controls. But a bunch of these tools out there now, they're getting more and more parental controls. So just go and look, right? Go to Best Buy and talk to them and say, I want a router with firewall, or firewall with parental controls, and talk to them and see what's going on, or Google some of these brands here and see what they've got that are some of the different, tools that you can use. And some of the stuff that's helpful is like time scheduling, where you can just turn it off at 10 o'clock at night. The kids' Wi-Fi network shuts off. They lose access to it, right? Whatever it might be. The filtering is you can block certain websites, or you can block certain categories. Those kinds of things that can be really helpful to use. And so this is an example here of Safe Search. And so I just wanted to include that at the end, right? So this is one where you can see I did a goofy search for boobs again, and this one came up, and all of those pictures got blocked because Safe Search was enabled. So by having Safe Search on, it blocked all of these different things, which made it so that your kids aren't going to see the stuff they're not supposed to see. So with that, really, that's what I've got. If you guys have questions and things, shoot email over to us, or really, I would say at this point, like, I hate to say it, but like, ask AI, ask Google, go check some of those things and see what's out there. There was somebody who put a question in about different routers. They'd recommended like Ubiquiti and some other brands, and I think those are all great. The point isn't necessarily, I guess, to go dive into those brands and what they offer. It's to go look for routers that have parental controls, that have the ability to do filtering, that have the ability to set times if you need to, right? Especially littler kids. If you've got a cell phone and I turn off the Wi-Fi, I can just use the cell service. But if you've got kids that have a tablet without cell service and you turn off Wi-Fi, they don't have internet. So it makes it so that it's hard for them to do things in the dark of the night or whatever else when you're not around. And so, anyways, I think the big thing is stay vigilant. Have conversations with your kids, have those conversations to around some of the skills and things that we talked about. Work on those things like self-esteem with them, and make sure they know that the door is always open and they can always have those conversations. And I think that becomes a really important thing. And that's really, at the end of the day, that to me is the thing that more and more is just what you need to have those conversations. The tools are helpful, but you can get around all the tools, and there's a lot of how-tos on how to get around the tools. And if your kids are curious, they'll probably go figure that out. But if you have those good conversations and good open relationships, I think that's, at the end of the day, where you'll get more resilient, curious children that'll get life skills that will be good for them in the long run. So anyways, we appreciate all you guys. Have a fantastic, weekend, and hope you guys got something out of this. Please share this around. I think this is one of those things that we all do better if we all do better. So share it around, share it with friends, family, other people, and the recording, it'll be up on the website, vectorchoice.com/webinars, and just encourage that you guys would share it and get more out there, because like I say, at the end of the day, we just want to help protect kids and keep them safe, and kind of help with some of the dangers of the internet. Talk to everybody later.